Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. We never thought one decision could change everything. It started as a simple conversation, one of those late night talks where you let your guard down and say things you never imagined saying out loud. We had been together for years, comfortable in our routines, secure in our love, but maybe that was the problem. Comfort had turned into predictability, and somewhere along the way, we had stopped challenging ourselves. So we made a choice, a risky one, something that neither of us had ever done before, something that felt exciting, terrifying, and completely unpredictable. It wasn't an impulse, it was a decision we both agreed on, fully aware that there was no way to predict how it would end. But at that moment, the fear of staying the same outweighed the fear of change. At first, everything felt fresh, like we had unlocked a new layer of our relationship. We were more open, more connected, and there was a rush of excitement that we hadn't felt in years. But then things started shifting in ways we didn't expect. Small moments that should have felt normal suddenly felt loaded with unspoken thoughts. A look, a pause, a hesitation before answering a simple question. We tried to convince ourselves that we were just overthinking it, that nothing had really changed. But deep down, we both knew something had. And then, one night, it all came to the surface. What happened next? Well, that's where things took a turn neither of us saw coming. Stay with us, because this story is far from over. That night, everything felt different. The air between us was heavier, filled with words we weren't saying. We sat across from each other, both pretending everything was fine, but the silence stretched too long, the pauses in our conversation lingering like unfinished thoughts. It was in the way we looked at each other, curious, cautious, as if we were trying to read what the other was thinking without saying it out loud. I remember the way my fingers tapped against the edge of my glass, a nervous habit I never noticed until then. They trembled slightly, though I wasn't cold. It was like my body already knew what my mind refused to admit. Something was shifting, and we had no control over it anymore. Then, finally, one of us spoke. "Do you feel it too?" A simple question, but it carried so much weight. And for a second, I wished we could rewind to before we made the decision, before we took the risk, before everything started feeling so uncertain. I wanted to lie, to say, no, everything's fine, but I couldn't. I nodded, and that was enough. We both sat there, knowing we had crossed some invisible line, but unsure of what it meant. Were we stronger now, or had we just exposed something fragile, something we couldn't put back together? I thought about all the moments that had led us here, the late-night conversations, the excitement, the way we had convinced ourselves that this was exactly what we needed. And maybe it had been. Maybe we needed to shake things up, to see what we were made of. But now there were questions neither of us had the answers to. Was this risk bringing us closer or pulling us apart? Were we scared of what we had done, or were we scared of what it meant for the future? The minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, and then something happened, something I never saw coming. And just like that, everything changed. But was it for better or worse? Well, that's something we were about to find out. Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. It wasn't an angry silence, but the kind that felt too delicate to break, like one wrong word would shatter everything. I kept glancing at my phone, not because I was expecting a message, but because I needed something to focus on, something to ground me. But even the screen felt unfamiliar, like a reminder of how much had changed in such a short time. I wanted to believe that this was just a phase, that we would wake up the next day and laugh about how dramatic we were being. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was an unspoken shift between us, and it wasn't just nerves. It was something real, something neither of us could ignore. I caught a glimpse of them out of the corner of my eye, the way they hesitated before speaking, the way their fingers curled around the edge of the table like they were holding on to something unseen. That was when I realized they were just as lost in this as I was. It wasn't just me feeling the weight of our choice, it was both of us. And yet, neither of us knew how to say it out loud. For the first time since we made this decision, I felt afraid, not of what we had done, but of what we hadn't considered. What if we had opened a door we weren't ready to walk through? What if this risk we had taken wasn't bringing us closer, but slowly pulling us apart? And just as I was about to speak, something happened, something that made my breath catch in my throat. And that's when I realized there was no turning back now. The moment hung between us, stretched thin like a thread ready to snap. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, my breath shallow as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Their eyes met mine, searching, but for what? I wasn't sure. Reassurance? An answer? Some kind of sign that we weren't about to lose everything we had built? I wanted to say something, anything, but my mind was blank. Every possible response felt wrong, too small for the weight of this moment. The space between us, once so familiar, now felt like an ocean, and I didn't know how to cross it. And then they finally spoke. I don't know if this was a mistake or if this was exactly what we needed. The words hit like a punch to the chest, not because they were harsh, but because they were honest, because I had been thinking the exact same thing. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Do you regret it? I asked, barely above a whisper. They hesitated. That hesitation was worse than any answer they could have given me. I felt something tighten in my chest. This was it. The moment where everything could change, where one wrong word could turn us into strangers. The choice we made had set something in motion, something we could no longer control. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the way their lips parted like they had something to say. But then they stopped. The silence stretched, unbearable, electric. And then, in an instant, something happened that neither of us were prepared for. And just like that, everything we thought we knew came crashing down. The moment shattered like glass. 1 second we were teetering on the edge of something unspoken, something fragile, and the next, everything flipped. It wasn't a sudden explosion or some dramatic confrontation. It was quieter than that, more dangerous. They exhaled sharply, rubbing their hands over their face like they were trying to wake up from a dream. And then, finally, they said it. The one thing I wasn't prepared to hear. I don't know if I can do this anymore. My stomach dropped. The words rang in my ears, echoing, twisting, turning into something I wasn't sure I could understand. I felt the floor shift beneath me, my breath catching. I thought I had been ready for anything, but not this, not them questioning everything. I tried to steady myself, tried to keep my voice from shaking. What do you mean? The question came out too soft, too careful, as if I was afraid of the answer. They looked at me, really looked at me. This risk, it was supposed to bring us closer, but what if it just showed us everything we don't want to see? A sharp pang ran through my chest, like a crack forming in something I thought was unbreakable. They weren't angry, they weren't accusing me of anything. But that almost made it worse. This wasn't about blame. This was about doubt, and doubt was so much harder to fight. I swallowed, trying to hold everything together. So what? You think this is over? Their silence was deafening. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to make them understand that whatever fear they were feeling, I was feeling it too. But something in their expression stopped me. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take another second of this unbearable tension, something unexpected happened. Their phone buzzed. A message. I saw the way their bodies stiffened before they even picked it up. It was subtle, but I caught it. A hesitation, a moment of panic. Something wasn't right. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know. But suddenly, the air felt heavier, the weight of another secret pressing down on us. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about us anymore. They stared at their phone, their fingers hovering over the screen, hesitating. My stomach clenched. I didn't even know what I was afraid of. I just knew that whatever was on that screen was about to change everything. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, they didn't answer. Then, slowly, they turned the screen toward me. It was a name I didn't expect, a name that shouldn't have been there. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Why are they messaging you?" They swallowed hard. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew how it would look. But I swear I wasn't hiding anything. I just," they exhaled sharply, running a hand through their hair. "I needed to figure out what it meant first." I could feel my whole body tense. Figure out what? They hesitated. "They reached out a few days ago. About us. About this risk we took. And at first I ignored it, but then they stopped, looking at me like they were bracing for impact. But then what?" I pushed. "They knew, before I even said anything. They knew what we did, and they knew it would lead us here." A cold wave ran through me. How? How could they possibly know? Their expression shifted. Guilt, fear, something else I couldn't quite place, because they've been through it before. My breath caught. I had thought the story was ours alone, that we were navigating something entirely new. But now, it was clear. Someone had seen this ending before. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if we were making our own choices anymore, or if we were just playing out something that had already been decided. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The weight of their words settled between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about us anymore. It never had been. Someone else had already walked this path, already seen how it could end. And now we were standing at the same crossroads, facing the same choices. I exhaled slowly, trying to process it all. "So, what do we do now?" My voice felt small, uncertain. They looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time in a while, I saw the person I fell in love with. Not the fear, not the doubt, just them. "I think we stop running from the truth," they said. "Whatever happens next, we decide that for ourselves." And maybe that was the answer. Not undoing what we had done, not pretending things hadn't changed, but facing it, owning it, understanding that risks don't always lead where we expect, but that doesn't mean they're mistakes. We sat there for a while, letting the silence settle into something lighter. The tension wasn't gone, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was just real. And maybe that was enough. As we walked out into the night, I realized something. No one could predict how this would turn out. Not the people who had been here before us, not even us.